The year 1947 marked a pivotal moment in South Asian history. The British Raj, which had ruled the Indian subcontinent for centuries, came to an end. In its place, two new nations emerged, India and Pakistan. The partition, however, was not a peaceful affair. It was marred by widespread violence and displacement, leaving a legacy of mistrust and animosity between the two newly independent states. At the heart of this conflict lay the princely state of Kashmir. This Muslim-majority region, ruled by a Hindu Maharaja, became a flashpoint between India and Pakistan. Both nations laid claim to Kashmir, leading to the first of several armed confrontations that would define their relationship for decades to come. The partition and the Kashmir conflict set the stage for a long and tumultuous relationship between India and Pakistan. Religious tensions, territorial disputes, and political ambitions fueled a cycle of violence and mistrust. This legacy continues to cast a long shadow over the region to this day. The birth of two nations from the ashes of a colonial empire was a moment of both hope and despair. The hope for a peaceful and prosperous future was intertwined with the despair of a violent partition and an unresolved conflict. This complex and often tragic history continues to shape the relationship between India and Pakistan. The first war between India and Pakistan erupted just months after partition. The conflict, known as the First Kashmir War, lasted from 1947 to 1948. It ended with a United Nations brokered ceasefire, but not before dividing Kashmir along a disputed border known as the Line of Control. This division, however, did little to quell the animosity between the two nations. In 1965, a second war broke out between India and Pakistan. The conflict, sparked by Pakistani incursions into Indian-administered Kashmir, lasted for 17 days. Once again, the war ended in a stalemate, with both sides claiming victory. The Tashkent Declaration, signed in 1966, called for a return to pre-war positions and a commitment to resolving disputes peacefully. However, peace remained elusive. In 1971, India and Pakistan clashed once more, this time over the issue of Bangladesh's independence. The conflict, known as the Bangladesh Liberation War, resulted in a decisive victory for India and the creation of Bangladesh. The war further deepened the mistrust and animosity between the two South Asian neighbors. The wars over Kashmir left deep scars on both nations. They resulted in the loss of thousands of lives and exacerbated the existing tensions. The unresolved issue of Kashmir continues to be a major obstacle to lasting peace in the region. While Kashmir remained the primary flashpoint, other conflicts and standoffs punctuated the India-Pakistan relationship. In 1999, Pakistani troops and militants infiltrated the Kargil district of Indian-administered Kashmir, triggering the Kargil War. The conflict, fought on the icy heights of the Himalayas, lasted for over 2 months and brought the two nuclear-armed nations to the brink of a wider war. Beyond conventional warfare, both countries engaged in a dangerous arms race. The acquisition of nuclear weapons by both India and Pakistan in the late 20th century added a terrifying new dimension to the conflict. The possibility of a nuclear war, however remote, hung like a dark cloud over the region. The threat of nuclear annihilation underscored the urgency of finding a peaceful resolution to the long-standing disputes between the two neighbors. However, deep-seated mistrust and the weight of history continued to impede any meaningful progress towards reconciliation. The Kargil War, the nuclear arms race, and the constant threat of escalation served as stark reminders of the fragile peace between India and Pakistan. The turn of the millennium did little to ease the tensions between India and Pakistan. In December 2001, an attack on the Indian Parliament in New Delhi, blamed on Pakistan-based militant groups, brought the two countries perilously close to another war. The attack led to a massive military buildup on both sides of the border, raising fears of a catastrophic conflict. In 2008, the world watched in horror as terrorists attacked several locations in Mumbai, India's financial capital. The attacks, which lasted for 4 days and resulted in the deaths of over 160 people, were carried out by the Pakistan-based militant group Lashkar-e-Taiba. The Mumbai attacks sent shockwaves across India and around the world, further straining relations between India and Pakistan. Despite international pressure to crack down on terrorist groups operating from its soil, Pakistan maintained that it was also a victim of terrorism and that it was committed to fighting all forms of extremism. India, however, remained unconvinced, accusing Pakistan of harboring and supporting terrorist groups that targeted Indian civilians and security forces. The post-2000 period witnessed a dangerous escalation in terrorist attacks and a hardening of stances on both sides. The Mumbai attacks in particular marked a turning point, deepening the mistrust and making any meaningful dialogue even more difficult. Section 5. A troubled present, the shadow of conflict in 2024. The year 2024 brought no respite from the long-standing tensions between India and Pakistan. In July, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi accused Pakistan of waging a proxy war against India by supporting militant groups operating in the disputed region of Kashmir. Modi's accusations came amidst a surge in violence in Kashmir, which had witnessed a series of deadly attacks on Indian security forces. In Jammu, a region bordering Pakistan, militant attacks claimed the lives of nearly a dozen Indian soldiers. The attacks, which targeted military installations and patrols, underscored the volatile security situation in the region. India blamed the attacks on Pakistan-based militant groups, further escalating tensions between the two nuclear-armed neighbors. The resurgence of violence in Kashmir and the accusations traded between New Delhi and Islamabad highlighted the fragility of the peace and the persistent threat of escalation in the region. The shadow of conflict continued to loom large over the subcontinent, casting a pall over any hopes for a peaceful resolution. As 2024 progressed, the situation on the ground remained tense. The risk of miscalculation and the possibility of another major confrontation between India and Pakistan remained a real and present danger. Section 6. The Kashmir Conundrum, a Gordian knot. The Kashmir dispute, a legacy of partition, remained the most intractable issue between India and Pakistan. Both countries claimed the region in its entirety and had fought 2 of their 3 wars over it. The line of control, established after the 1948 war, divided Kashmir into Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan-administered Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. India maintained that Jammu and Kashmir was an integral part of its territory, pointing to the Instrument of Accession, signed by the Maharaja of Kashmir in 1947. Pakistan, on the other hand, argued that the predominantly Muslim population of Kashmir should have the right to self-determination, as promised by the United Nations Security Council resolutions. Adding to the complexity of the dispute was the presence of a separatist movement within Indian-administered Kashmir. The movement, which ranged from groups advocating for greater autonomy to those demanding complete independence from India, further complicated the situation. Despite numerous attempts at dialogue and mediation, the Kashmir dispute remained a seemingly intractable problem. The lack of trust between India and Pakistan, the complexity of the issue, and the involvement of internal actors made finding a mutually acceptable solution extremely challenging. Section 7. The perils of proxies, cross-border terrorism and covert operations. Adding fuel to the fire were allegations of cross-border terrorism and covert operations. India accused Pakistan of supporting and sponsoring terrorist groups operating in Indian-administered Kashmir, providing them with safe havens, training and logistical support. Pakistan, in turn, accused India of supporting separatist movements in Balochistan, a resource-rich province in southwestern Pakistan. These accusations and counter-accusations created a vicious cycle of mistrust and hostility. The use of proxies, both state and non-state actors, added a dangerous layer of complexity to the conflict, making it difficult to establish clear lines of responsibility and accountability. The shadowy world of covert operations, espionage and sabotage further exacerbated the situation. Both countries were believed to be engaged in intelligence gathering and subversive activities against each other, fueling paranoia and suspicion. The lack of transparency and the often murky nature of these operations made it challenging to verify claims and counterclaims. This lack of clarity only served to deepen the mistrust and make any meaningful dialogue even more difficult. Section 8. A world-involved international efforts and stalemates. The international community, recognizing the dangers posed by the long-standing conflict between India and Pakistan, made several attempts to mediate and facilitate a peaceful resolution. The United Nations, in particular, played an active role, passing numerous resolutions calling for a peaceful settlement of the Kashmir dispute. The UN Security Council Resolution 47, adopted in 1948, called for a ceasefire, demilitarization, and a plebiscite to determine the will of the Kashmiri people. However, the resolution was never implemented due to disagreements over the modalities of the plebiscite. Over the years, various other international actors, including the United States, China, and the European Union, engaged in efforts to encourage dialogue and reduce tensions between India and Pakistan. However, these efforts were hampered by the deep-seated mistrust between the two countries and their unwillingness to compromise on their core positions. While the international community continued to express concern over the situation, it lacked the leverage to force India and Pakistan to resolve their differences. The conflict, therefore, remained a regional powder keg with the potential to escalate into a wider conflagration. Section 9. The future of discord, an uncertain trajectory. As India and Pakistan moved further into the 21st century, the future of their relationship remained uncertain. The long history of conflict, mistrust, and unresolved issues continued to cast a long shadow. The Kashmir dispute, the most contentious issue between the two countries, showed no signs of abating. Both sides remained entrenched in their positions, making a mutually acceptable solution elusive. The threat of terrorism, emanating from both state and non-state actors, continued to pose a serious challenge to peace and stability in the region. The use of proxies and the involvement of external powers further complicated the situation. The lack of trust between India and Pakistan, coupled with the absence of a sustained and meaningful dialogue, made it difficult to envision a future free from conflict. The two nuclear-armed neighbors remained locked in a dangerous embrace, with the potential for miscalculation and escalation always present. The path to peace and reconciliation remained long and arduous. It would require political will, compromise, and a willingness to address the root causes of the conflict. Until then, the shadow of discord would continue to loom large over the Indian subcontinent.